Is the value of a bowl game and winning it, going to a bowl game and winning it against like a Georgia Southern, is that greater than what the negative aspect of it could be if you were to go and lose that game?
Yep.
And I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure it would have been for Kansas. Pay heed, all who enter, and beware this podcast. That's right. This is the paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you've not already, you should be doing three things. You should be subscribing to our channel, whether that's on audio, on Apple and Spotify, or on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. If you're on YouTube, you should like the video, and you should also leave us a comment on YouTube. If you're on audio, you can leave us a 5-star rating and review. Share your comment, share your thoughts, join in on the conversation. We love hearing from all of you great KU fans, and yes, we do read the comments. So if you think we don't, you're wrong. We do. We do see them, and we do read them. And if you're on YouTube, you should subscribe so that you'll be notified when we do our live shows. We just did a great live post-game show on Sunday after KU defeated Missouri in basketball. That was a fun one. Darren Peterson back. We'll obviously talk more KU basketball later in the week as KU prepares to take on NC State and sort of their last real marquee non-conference matchup on Saturday afternoon. As for today's show, wanted to dive into a little bit more about the bowl situation because that kind of spiked early in the week and over the weekend with a bunch of reporting from Brett McMurphy on Monday, basically saying that Notre Dame was going to opt out of playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl against BYU. K-State then had voted to opt out and then kind of did end up opting out. And that sort of set off a domino effect of a bunch of schools opting out, including Kansas, which we'll talk about on today's show, and also get into a little bit maybe why they decided to do that, and also a particular position group that you need to be keeping an eye on this offseason and into the spring. So let's start there with this whole situation about the bowl eligibility. Kansas goes 5-7, obviously, so not bowl eligible. And then you have teams starting to opt out, and then the debacle of the playoff release, Notre Dame gets left out. Then Notre Dame comes out and says, you know what, screw you, we're not going to play in our bowl game against BYU. That sets off a domino effect. K-State went 6-6. They also end up declining to go to a bowl. And then Brett Murphy's reporting comes out on Monday that a bunch of teams end up declining invitations. So basically, for those of you who are unfamiliar with how this works, this happened in the past many times. I shouldn't say many times, but it has happened in the past where there's an APR ranking system that they use, and it's just basically in order. If you're 5-7 and you have the highest APR ranking, you're the next one. Then just down the list until they get somebody to fill that last bowl spot. And so these are listed teams that ended up declining that option to play in a bowl game or 5-7, according to Brett McMurphy. Florida State, Auburn, UCF, Baylor, Rutgers, Temple, and Kansas. Ultimately, that spot was filled. This was all for the Birmingham Bowl, by the way, against Georgia Southern. Ultimately, that spot was filled by Appalachian State, which, funnily enough, Georgia Southern and Appalachian State had already played earlier in the season. So that's a bit kind of a bummer there. But yeah, all these Power 4 teams decided to opt out for various reasons. And again, I think we'll dive a little bit deeper into maybe why KU chose to not do it. But ultimately, this is kind of, I think, opened up a bigger conversation. And just to start the show off here, Kevin, I wanted to ask you this. Notre Dame gets snubbed from the College Football Playoff and then essentially throws a hissy fit about it and decides that they're not going to play in their bowl game. Then you have a team like K-State who had playoff aspirations, I think, in the preseason. They were picked to win the Big 12. Obviously a disastrous season. They end up then, Coach Chris Klieman ends up retiring. They hire Colin Klein. So they're in the midst of a transition. Players didn't ultimately, they said they had a players vote basically and ultimately decided not to play. And then you have this list of other 5-7 schools that have decided not to play. I think it begs the question of, like, what is the status or value of bowl games that aren't playoff games at this point?
Yeah, there isn't a ton of value for teams that have playoff expectations or hopes. I think they still have value if you're going to be in that 6-6, 7-5 range, and you're trying to put a nice cap on a season, reward your fan base with another trip. All of those different things. I do think that there's sort of a sweet spot that the bowls can hit, but from an ultimate meaning standpoint, they just don't mean what they used to. There's a lot of college football playoff or bust for certain fan bases. And I'm not saying K-State was necessarily that way. If K-State hadn't gone to the playoff but was, say, 9-3 this year, Nick, I don't think they would have voted out of their bowl game. But you had the retirement, the coaching change. Colin Klein isn't coming to Manhattan, at least not on a permanent basis, until A&M is done in the playoff. And so I understand K-State. Notre Dame is interesting because I think that's another thing altogether. And we saw a couple years ago, Florida State got absolutely royally screwed by the college football playoff committee, and that they went undefeated. Of course, they lost their starting quarterback. Their offense wasn't great in the 2 games that they played without him, but their defense was national title caliber in those 2 wins. And you would have had a month basically for them to figure out the quarterback situation. Instead, they don't get it. They wind up going to a bowl game against Georgia, and Georgia absolutely beats the tar out of them. And I'm not saying that BYU would have beaten the tar out of Notre Dame, but I do think that you can get into bowl matchups where one team cares about it a lot more than the other one. And so I understand that aspect of it from Notre Dame. I hate it because I love the Pop-Tarts Bowl. To me, it is college football insanity at its absolute best. I mean, they've cooked up lore like around the Pop-Tarts now and everything. I mean, it's ridiculous and perfect in college football. And so I don't like that part of it, but ultimately I also get, well, we're going to have a bunch of opt-outs. Maybe BYU doesn't have as many opt-outs because you're playing Notre Dame in a bowl game and they're excited about it. They want to go and prove what they can do. And so I get Notre Dame's, hey, this is a lose-lose situation. If we beat BYU, we were supposed to beat BYU. If we have a bunch of opt-outs, our players aren't as up for it, and BYU beats us, that's a really bad look. And so ultimately they chose just not to play in it.
Yeah, and I guess that is sort of the logical extreme conclusion that you would arrive at in this era of college football, right? Because obviously we've seen over the last couple of years, lots of teams have had individual players opt out, right? Players that are going to the NFL or whatever, opting out, and an entire team opting out, I guess, is sort of, again, the logical next step in that calculation of, okay, well, if Notre Dame was going to play in this game, and let's say like Jeremiah Love and, a bunch of other Notre Dame players were not going to play in the game, then okay, then the whole team's just not going to, right? Like that's sort of the next, I guess, logical step in that sort of equation, even though it does suck, right? Like it's a huge bummer, and it's very frustrating. And the playoff, I think some of it has to do with the media, specifically ESPN, with how they sort of present this whole situation. Where, Kevin, over the past 4 months, if you turn on Game Day, if you turn on anybody national college football pundit, it's playoff. They're only talking about the playoff, right? That's the only thing that matters. And so when you do that for an entire season and you talk about how this is the only thing that matters, well then, wow, what a shock when teams that aren't in that thing that is supposedly the only thing that matters don't want to show up or don't want to play in anything else, right? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword from that standpoint of, like, I think that's partly to blame for it, but also if you want, and this is another sad fact of reality nowadays, is like, if you want Notre Dame to play so desperately, the best way to do that is probably to fork up money, put NIL on the line, put money on the line, right? And, financially incentivize teams and players to play in these bowl games, because I have to assume that these bowl sponsors have the capital or ability to do that if they wanted to. If they really, really wanted to see Notre Dame versus BYU, whatever the matchup may be, they could financially incentivize them to do that, which I think for a lot of old guard college football fans, and even myself included a little bit, that's an extremely, I guess, jaded position to have, right? Like, oh, it's only about the money. Like, that's the only way you'll get people, players to play anymore. But that's just kind of the reality of where it's at in this day and age. And I think it definitely sucks, but like, that's kind of where things are at this point.
Yeah, and teams have individual discussions all the time where they'll finish up their season, they'll go to a bowl game, and QB1 will walk in and be like, "Hey, you want me to play for this bowl game? That's $100,000 on my tab," or whatever. And so that can add up. And I don't know what the answer is, Nick. Like, I mean, obviously, we're just coming off of a period in college basketball where you saw players era. And I don't know if the best thing for the Bulls is to go to something like that where it's like, hey, you play in this game. This is, money straight to your NIL. Maybe you don't get like the little gift packages that they used to get or things like that, but we are straight up writing you a check to go to your NIL, and maybe that's something that encourages people to play. But whatever the answer is, you're right. I can't remember the last segment that we watched on an ESPN program that was like, so-and-so's having a really great year. Let's talk about the possibility of them in the Independence Bowl.
Yeah, 100%. I would just say this. My two sort of knee-jerk reaction fixes to this would be, one, fully adopt a basically tournament bracket model, expand it, make it like the FCS playoffs where it's 24 teams or whatever. Or two, just do away with bowl games entirely. Just say, you know what, screw it. No more bowl games. The only bowl games we're going to play are going to be playoff games, right? That to me, I think, would be the most two logical options, but I don't know, obviously there's a ton of money tied up in playing these games and, TV contracts and TV and all that stuff. So it's certainly more complicated than that, but yeah, it's obviously not a fantastic situation. All right, let's refocus here on specifically KU and their situation and maybe why Kansas ultimately declined their bowl invitation. So we'll dive into that coming up next.
What's up, guys? It is Benny Heiss, KCSN betting analyst, and Missouri. Your moment is finally here. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is now live right here in the state. So now you can make every game so much more exciting with same-game parlays, money lines, props, and more, all from your phone, and it's all safe, secure, and easy to use. And listen, we know fans in the state of Missouri know game day, whether it's the tailgates, the noise, the passion. And now with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bring that same energy to every snap, every touchdown, and every win. Right now, new Missouri customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. There's no waiting, no nonsense, just pure action powered by America's top-rated sportsbook app. So here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code KCSN. Code KCSN. Remember, new Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. That's code KCSN. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Bonus bets expire 7 days after they're issued. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, please see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Pay Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. We do live shows on our YouTube channel, so the best way to be notified when we go live is to subscribe on YouTube. We've already done a handful of KU basketball live YouTube shows after games. We'll be doing more of those once we get to conference play as well. So absolutely, you should be subscribed on our YouTube channel so you know when we go live. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and also share a comment. We love to hear your thoughts. And hey, if you're a college football fan, love to hear what your thoughts are on this whole bowl situation as it pertains to both KU and sort of, I guess, nationally. But let's refocus back here on KU specifically here. Kansas, as I mentioned, sort of kick off the show, had a chance to basically go to the Birmingham Bowl against Georgia Southern. That was the matchup that was the last bowl that was looking to be filled. And again, you had a handful of teams ahead of Kansas decline this invitation, including Florida State, Auburn, UCF, Baylor, Rutgers, Temple, just some of those teams that were in front of Kansas that ultimately declined it. And then it came to KU. And KU ultimately did decline them as well. It was confirmed by a KU spokesperson after the initial report by Brett Murphy on Monday. And the question becomes, why decline? And I think it's a lot more complex than maybe it would seem on the surface for KU. First and foremost, I think the biggest issue would be just simply fielding a team. Yeah. I mean, you have to understand that when you go 5-7, there is some finality there. There is some finality of, hey, the season is over, right? Players then move on to finishing up their schooling, finishing up their classes. Finals week is actually happening right now for KU. seniors have sort of mentally, I guess, concluded their season and careers, right? Or players that know they're going to be returning for Kansas. So I think that's really kind of this first issue you run into, is that you'd have to get all those guys back, right? This isn't a situation where it's the team is still together and has still been practicing. No, like once the season ended against Utah, the season ended, right? Like That's it. That was done. And so you may have players that have already gone home. I mentioned it's finals week. And also for some of the older people that maybe listen or whatnot, I can tell you that finals week has changed significantly from what it used to be versus what it is now. As a recent graduate from KU, it's not, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you go into the classroom, sit down and take a final. It's a lot different now, depending on department, classes, things like that. So it is, while the finals week is happening right now, a lot of times if you may be done early in the week and you may be then, heading home for winter break or whatever it may be. So I think that's sort of the first logistical issue you would run into, is getting your players, getting your team back together, and then getting them mentally locked in to play a game, right? Like refocused, you have basically 3 weeks to do that. I think the Birmingham Bowl was the last weekend in December. So, what's the likelihood that you could quickly and effectively get all of your players back to campus, start practicing, get them mentally prepared and mentally locked in to then go perform in a game and be competitive, right? I think first and foremost, that is the first logistical hurdle that you have to overcome, is just simply getting your team together. And that's not even factoring in the transfer portal, where you have players that are going to be considering entering the transfer portal, maybe already have, right? We've seen a handful of players announce their intention to enter the portal as well. So that's not even factoring in that aspect of it, which I think adds a whole nother level of, can you get players back to perform at that level? And then I mentioned in the first segment, but there is a level of national exposure, right? Playing a game on ESPN, playing in a bowl game, right? Like there is a level of TV eyeballs that would get on you, but it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because you're going to go play Georgia Southern in the Birmingham Bowl. That was the option that was given to you. You beat Georgia Southern, like you were talking about with Notre Dame and BYU, Kevin. You beat Georgia Southern, it's okay, good. You beat a group of 5 team. You lose to Georgia Southern, and suddenly that PR that you're looking for goes the other way, right? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and you would expect Georgia Southern to be a hungry team that would be looking to knock off a Power 4 program, right? So the question there becomes, is the value of playing and or winning a game like that more than the negative value you may get from potentially losing in a game like that? So that's something you have to factor in. And again, I would reiterate also, probably Kevin, you might know better, but coaches, coaching staff, when you're 5-7 and the season's over like that, you are already on to 2026. You're already on to the next season. Like if you are a coach, you're already trying to build your roster for 2026. So to sort of put that on pause and then try to get all your players back, get everybody refocused, get everybody in a position where you feel like you're mentally and physically prepared to go play another game and perform at a high level, that is not an easy task. And I think that's probably important to underscore. And then I think, Kevin, maybe the most significant factor in this whole conversation, certainly as it pertains to KU, is the financial factor.
Yeah.
Teams don't usually make money. Athletic departments don't usually make money off of going to bowl games like this. It's actually, I think, in many cases, a losing money situation of cost of the team, getting the team down there. Now, I know the conference makes money and then it's split, I think is how it works among, everybody, all the teams that are in bowl games, but there is a very serious financial aspect of it as well that must be in consideration. And considering we know how closely KU is monitoring its financial situation in totality over the course of this whole year, that's probably something that was a serious conversation between Lance Leipold, Travis Goff, and the administration that I'm guessing was a pretty significant factor in the ultimate decision.
Yeah, I think there's that. The other thing I think, Nick, is the injury part of it. And I don't mean like, hey, this guy's got a broken leg. I mean, you've had guys for the last month because everybody's banged up at the end of the year. and maybe they shouldn't even be playing, but they're out there with a high ankle sprain or something like that has been giving them a lot of trouble. And it's okay, I'll deal with this when the season's over. And I think probably, Nick, you have some examples of guys that, okay, the season's over, I'm going to start taking care of this thing that I've been playing with. And it would be very tough to sort of hit the reset button on that and be like, no, we need you to play a little bit later this month. And so I do think you hit on a lot of different factors. And like you said, it is a multifaceted reason probably why KU said no, and it makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Now, setting that all aside, so that was sort of, I think, the administration / logistics side of this discussion. From the fan perspective, I totally understand why you would be upset or annoyed about KU declining an opportunity like this. Because this is a Kansas program that seemingly, I think, could use, the extra exposure, could use the chance to get out there and play another game to build some positive momentum for 2026, right? Like, you just had a 5-7 season and it was pretty disappointing, right? You built some positive momentum by going out and getting a win. And there's not a single bone in my body that doesn't think that Lance Leipold wanted that Lance Leipold wanted to go play in this game. And I think that's something else is I'm almost certain he would want to. And because Lance Leipold had already talked previously towards the end of the season about the possibility of getting those extra practices, right?
Yeah.
Of having the opportunity to keep the team together. But again, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, the team is not together. So it's not about, at this stage of the off season, it wouldn't be about keeping the team together. It would be about getting the team back together, right? Like it would be about bringing everybody back because you've already probably had guys, move on or go home for the holidays, winter break, whatever it may be. So I totally understand that. My take on it is this: over the course of 12 games this season, KU didn't earn the right to play in a bowl by virtue of its play over 12 games. And because of that, I'm not overly upset they ultimately decided to decline this opportunity. I don't think they deserved it, quite frankly. And I think I'm in a boat where I have already myself, as a KU fan, had already mentally moved on to 2026. I don't know how you feel, Kevin, but that was kind of my take on it. Like, I understand the frustration of the fans saying, hey, chance to play another game, yada, yada, yada. I outlined some of the logistical issues behind that. But like, my viewpoint of it is like, you went 5-7 and you didn't deserve to be in a bowl game, I don't think. And so that to me is ultimately why I don't have a really strong negative reaction to KU making that decision.
Yeah, when the NCAA took away Reggie Bush's Heisman, somebody was talking on the radio about, if you're Vince Young, do you basically go demand a Heisman trophy because you had a great year and all that stuff? And, I think initially I wrote something basically about, hey, Vince should accept it if that's what happens. But the more I thought about it after I wrote the article, it's like that thing would always have that little something extra to it because you didn't get it, right? Like, that was not your Heisman trophy. And so I think when you see the way that the NCAA, like when they took a title away from Louisville, first of all, it's ridiculous. Like, it's not like every Louisville fan is going to lose all their memories of that team because you stripped the title away. But two, it wasn't like Michigan stepped up to take that title either. And, they played in that national title game. They know the way that it went. And quite frankly, Kansas went into its final game against Utah where a win gets you eligible, a loss doesn't. And so, like you said, to kind of circle back around and, hey, these other 35 teams rejected it or whatever. Do you want to go to a bowl game? I do get the feel like it wouldn't be the same as if you had just earned that thing outright.
100% agree. And again, to me as well, I think when I talked about this earlier, the other point is the value of going to a bowl game greater? Is the value of a bowl game and winning it, going to a bowl game and winning it against like a Georgia Southern, is that greater than what the negative aspect of it could be if you were to go and lose that game?
Yep.
And I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure it would have been for Kansas. Again, that is setting aside everything else. That's setting aside the money, setting aside the financials, setting aside the logistics. Like, just simply put, is the value of going to the Birmingham Bowl against Georgia Southern and winning it greater than the value of potentially losing it if you're trotting out a team of younger players that maybe aren't fully prepared, or guys that have already mentally checked out and aren't able to come back fully locked in. I don't know that it is. And so that is also kind of where I fell as well on that. And then I will just add one other thing here on top of that is, Kevin, you may be able to speak to this as well, but the idea of, hey, okay, well, maybe you just go out and roll out a bunch of your younger players, right, to see what they have in a game environment. And we're going to talk more about this in our last segment, but just generally speaking, hey, you have a bunch of young players. Here's a chance to go out there and see what they can do in a game environment and see how they react in a real game. Guys, it's the era of the transfer portal. And if you do that and you send Leroy Harris out there and he gets 4 sacks and a couple strip sacks, right, that's an opportunity. That's tape for other programs to look at to say, okay, here's a guy that maybe we want to go get in the transfer portal, right? Or maybe you have a young freshman that you send out there that has a Malachi Curvey, for example, who we've talked about on the show, who goes out and has a big performance in a bowl game against Georgia Southern, and all of a sudden there's other programs calling, and it's not even necessarily about somebody potentially transferring out because of that, but it's also about, well, if other programs are calling, that player may be asking for more from KU, right? And that takes away resources that you would want to send elsewhere if you're in the transfer portal. So that's another thing I would add is having your young players in a game environment could potentially lead to more transfer out, I guess, is a possibility. And I know that's kind of like, looking at the situation and saying, well, it could happen, so it's not worth it. But I think that is a little bit part of it too, also.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, you have a chance to do it. And then the other part of it, Nick, is what if you're rolling out young players in this situation and a freshman in that freshman class looks out and sees Malachi Curvey over there, sees, Garrett Martin over here, sees, all these young guys, and he's not one of them. And so you also have that aspect of it. And I'm not saying you don't need to earn your spot, because you do, but you're kind of opening yourself up to more scrutiny than you would normally have by going that route. Yeah.
So hopefully that helps contextualize a little bit the situation. I think I think if you are legitimately frustrated about Kansas turning it down, I think you have a right to feel that way. I'm not saying that all fans should just be like, whatever, I think I totally understand that. But I think overall, from a logistical standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and maybe even from a personnel standpoint, probably the pros outweighed the cons of not, or I guess I should say the cons of going outweighed the pros of going, or of trying to, cobble together the team, get everybody ready, XYZ, all that stuff that I talked about. So that's probably ultimately, I think, how it ended up. But again, I totally understand from the outside perspective of fans, having legitimate gripes about that, because I get it. And unfortunately, just kind of going back to what we talked about in the first segment, this feels like truly the sort of final nail in the coffin, potentially, of what is now looking like a bygone era of college football. I mean, I hate to put it in such stark terms, but that's kind of what it feels like to me with the Notre Dame stuff, with kind of how things unfolded with the Birmingham Bowl. Like, it feels like there's going to be a real seismic shift in college football and how this whole process unfolds going forward. So that's a bit of a bummer, but not much you can do about it now. There is one area that I know, Kevin, you were really interested in that we want to talk about next. And Lance Leipold said something also in his press conference last week talking about National Signing Day that I think really piqued your interest, Kevin, and also got my interest as well. And it is somewhat tied into this bowl conversation. So we'll get to that coming up next.
My name is Terrell Jolly. A lot of people call me TJ, founder and CEO of Integrity Capital Management. So Integrity Capital Management originally started out as a property management firm, but we slowly transitioned to what is described as an incremental development firm that's focused on situational housing. I know most people say affordable, but we believe in creating housing for people that are actually in need and built to the end user. I believe everyone needs a home, because when you have home, you have hope. The reality is that when you're building a business, one thing you don't think about is like what a true banking relationship means. And, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Debbie early on in my career when I was just trying to get going. And as a small business, it's really challenging at times because people don't understand the concept or not believe the longevity because you're just getting started. But Debbie was willing to take a chance on me, be patient with me. I almost look at it like a grassroots initiative. She's seen and believe what I'm about. Anybody that's really true about their business and want to get some things done, I would definitely trust hands down Enterprise, because Deb's team, along with Aaron and Jackie and all the amazing people that work behind the scenes, even from the treasury side, I would say, hey, give them an opportunity, because you won't be disappointed and you will actually be in hands that actually somebody care and that will see you from start to finish.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. If you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and especially on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks, KCSN. Subscribe there, leave a comment, share your thoughts. Would love to hear how you're feeling about the bowl situation and the offseason and much more. Like the video. And again, also on YouTube, we do our live post-game shows. We've done several for KU basketball. Just did a great one on Sunday after a big win for KU against Missouri. And we'll be doing plenty more over the course of conference play and beyond as well. So one area that we didn't talk about specifically that I think also maybe adds to a reason why you maybe would have wanted to see KU play in a bowl game is the quarterback situation. Kansas, Kevin, for the first time under Lance Leipold, is 100%, without a doubt, going to have a new quarterback starting for them in 2026. And that is 100%. You're going to have a new quarterback. Jalen Daniels is done. Jalen Daniels is gone. The Jalen Daniels era is over. And so one aspect of the whole bowl situation, and especially as it pertains to what we were talking about towards the end of the segment there in our last segment about getting guys out there in a game situation, you're going to have what appears to be a three-headed quarterback battle heading into the offseason and into the spring and into the summer and into 2026. A bowl game could have been a chance to jumpstart that. A bowl game could have been a chance to jumpstart where you think you're at as it pertains to that particular room. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the quarterback situation. I know Lance Leipold said something specifically that sort of piqued your interest. We can get to that as well. But sort of where you're at with that discussion.
Yeah, we've said it on the show before, Nick, but I think people need to view this as a legitimate three-way quarterback competition. And that's not anything against Jalen Mason. I just think that it's probably going to take Jalen a little bit of time coming in to understand the system, all of those different things. But I know a lot of people kind of look at Zeke as the heir apparent in that room and say, my gosh, and I get it. He is really exciting and fun to watch play. I've been a David McComb guy since he was recruited. I think there's a lot of ability there. But also, like we've talked about, Cole Ballard does so many of the different things that you want your quarterback to do, from getting everybody aligned, managing the game. And I bring that phrase up specifically, Nick, because I know in that quote that you're about to play from Lance Leipold, when he talked about what they want to see from the quarterback, game management was a big part of it. He talked about how sometimes you feel like that's a negative thing, right? A quarterback who is a game manager a lot of times means, well, this guy isn't a star guy. He's just playing not to lose. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. What they mean is you want to get your team out of bad plays. You want to get them into good plays. You want to, yes, you want to make plays, but that part is maybe the single most important part of playing quarterback right now. And that, along with leadership, is something that Cole Ballard has. Now, I think Zeke's got a lot of leadership ability. I think David McComb has leadership ability. So I'm not saying Cole's the only one that has it. I'm just saying I think Cole has a better argument than people think as it stands right now on December 9th.
Yeah, last Wednesday on December 3rd, Lance Leipold, as part of his press conference relating to National Signing Day and some of the high school players, also took a few minutes to sort of expand on everything you just kind of talked about there in terms of what he and the staff are looking for specifically from their starting quarterback in 2026. Here's a little bit of what he had to say about that.
But I'm looking, this staff is for the quarterback that'll win this job, that is going to have great command of the offense and understand what we're trying to do, make great decisions, be able to make the throws that are needed within this offense, which is really all throws. We got to be able to get the ball down the field. We got to be great in the play action game. We got to have great decision making in the RPO game. We got to be able to, but these guys have running abilities, and now everybody's going to think with Isaiah or Cole that we're just going to run the heck out of the quarterback and let them take 30 shots a game, and that's not really that's not what we're made out to be or want to be. But we got to be able to run when we need to, especially against certain looks. But again, to be somebody that can create plays and be able to, sometimes when you use the word manage the game, it's looked at as negatively, but we have to manage the game in this offense in a way that gives us the best chance to win football games.
So that's a little bit of what Lance Leipold had to say. He was also asked basically point blank about the status of the quarterback room and said, we're happy with who we have, which essentially means your quarterback is on the roster. You're not going to be going into the transfer portal. That was basically exactly what he said with that. So for a fact that it's going to be this 3 quarterback battle that you mentioned with Ballard, Marshall, and McComb, which, by the way, if you listen to the show, Kevin said that. He actually predicted that at the end of the season in a Utah postgame show, in which Kevin made the prediction that the quarterback for 2026 for KU was already on the roster. And Lance Leipold seems to agree with that. So you're not going into the transfer portal. You know that your starting quarterback in 2026 is going to be one of those 3 guys. And so, again, I think that maybe could have been an argument for, hey, yes, go play the bowl game, because then maybe you could have given all 3 of those guys a chance to do something in a game atmosphere. But overall, when you look at this quarterback battle, Kevin, what stands out to you about it at this stage? And I guess let me ask you this. Would a bowl game, having the opportunity to have all 3 of those guys, or at least 2 of them in a game setting, would that have truly affected anything in terms of, hey, what this guy did in the Birmingham Bowl against Georgia Southern is the difference between him starting and him not starting?
I don't think it would have done that. I think it could have given basically somebody a little bit of a leg up heading into the spring, right? This is going to be a full-blown quarterback competition, and by that, Nick, I don't think this thing's going to be settled in the spring. I think a lot of times quarterback competitions are settled in the summer when you go through workouts, when they see the leadership and all of those different things. And then through the first few practices of the fall, and you see, the scrimmages and things of that nature. But one of the things that stood out to me, Nick, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, is when Lance was listing the traits for what he wanted out of a quarterback, there was a little Cole Ballard in there. There was a little bit that you could attribute to Zeke Marshall, and a little bit when you're talking about being able to, make the throws down the field and all those things that maybe are a little bit more of a strength of David McComb. And I think that's the fascinating thing about this quarterback competition is I do think that all 3 of them bring something a little bit different to the table, and all 3 of those are things that Kansas is looking for from the quarterback position.
Yeah, and again, maybe the bowl reps would have helped, maybe they wouldn't, but I'm kind of with you on, it feels like maybe that wouldn't have moved the needle that much in terms of you're going to go into the spring, then you're going to go into the summer, and then you're going to go into fall camp, determining who your starting quarterback will be. Cole Ballard, most fans I think know what he brings to the table. Just to give you some stats for what he did this season. This year he played in, I think, 8 games, went 10 of 22 throwing the ball, 108 yards, had the 1 touchdown on the 1 pass against Iowa State, also threw an interception. Isaiah Marshall, passing-wise, was 3 for 3. All of that came against Wagner, never attempted to pass in a game after that for 28 yards. He also had 15 carries on the year for 160 yards, kind of going back to what Lance Leipold was talking about with running the ball with the quarterback. So, yeah, it's obviously a very interesting competition, and it's one that we'll be monitoring very closely, basically from now until opening day 2026, essentially, in terms of who's going to be the guy for KU football. And yeah, I mean, like you said, this is where Lance Leipold's going to have to probably decide over the offseason exactly what he is looking for, because you heard from that quote there. He kind of, in a lot of ways, as you said, Kevin, basically just listed traits of all three guys.
Yeah.
But not all three of those guys have all three of those traits. So there's going to have to be a conversation, I think, at some point to be had and said, what are we going to lean into, right? Are we going to lean into, we want a guy that can manage the offense, and as you said, not in a negative way, not in sort of in that type of way, but do we want a guy that can manage the offense, make sure we're in the right play calls and everything, even if maybe that limits us a little bit in terms of what he can do throwing the football in terms of Cole Ballard? Do we want a guy who can make really explosive plays with his feet, can make throws, but maybe not every throw, and is just really a dynamic guy that can play some backyard football at times, and Isaiah Marshall? Or are we going to lean into, you know what, we want to be able to truly throw the ball all over the field with a guy like David McComb, right? To me, it feels like at some point there's going to have to be a conversation with Lance Leipold, Jim Zabrowski, Matt Lubick, whoever else is involved with the real scheme of the offense to determine exactly the direction KU wants to go with whichever quarterback they think is going to give them the best chance.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we aren't even talking about, Nick, is, they aren't going into the portal for a quarterback, but what they do in the portal could maybe give you a little bit of a clue for kind of what they're looking for, right? In terms of, the guys that you want to surround Cole Ballard with might be a little different than the guys you want to surround David McComb with or Zeke Marshall with. And so I'm not saying they're going to outright pick and say, hey, it's Cole Ballard, let's go out and land all these guys for Cole Ballard to have success. But I do think that the transfer portal is worth watching from that standpoint of, okay, is this going to be a team where we're going to take the onus off the quarterback position quite a bit? We're going to go out, get a couple really good running backs, really spend in that area, and we're going to be who we were against Utah, in terms of we're going to run, and then occasionally we're going to throw the ball, or are they going to maybe lean into some other things and other parts of it? I think the transfer portal is going to be interesting from that standpoint, even if it's not from a straight up, are you taking a quarterback in the transfer portal?
Yeah. And if you did want to go get a quarterback in the transfer portal, you have to remember that's resources you're taking away from the rest of your roster.
Yep.
And so I think at this stage, it's more about, you have to, if you're Lance Leipold, if you're the staff, I think considering what you have already in the room, you just have to say, you know what, we trust our evaluation, we trust our development skills, we trust that our guy is already in the room and that we can make that work. And then you're able to then take the resources you want and spread them to the rest of the team and make the whole team better. I think that's kind of where you have to be at, right? Even if maybe you or I don't necessarily think that they have the right guy, right? I think internally you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your evaluations and your development that you can take one of these three guys and make them the guy in 2026.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that you made a pretty good point there about that does free up resources for you to spend on the rest of the roster. And we talked about, Nick, how many pieces Kansas could return defensively. Maybe the defense winds up being better than you think it is because all those guys are coming back. They got another year in the system. And then you go out and spend well on, a few guys that can kind of bring the whole picture together. And I think by not spending on quarterback, you're opening your wallet up for other positions and allowing yourself to build the best possible roster around those three quarterbacks. But it's been a while since KU's had a legitimate, honest-to-God quarterback competition. Haven't really had one under Lance Leipold, Nick. I know that it was open his first year, and Jason Bean wound up winning that thing, and then you wound up going to Jalen Daniels later on. But it's been quite a while since we've gone to practices and you're out there watching and seeing like, okay, which quarterback is taking a step ahead today. And so obviously you would rather have, a solid base at the quarterback position where who that guy is. He's a no doubt star player. That's the best possible outcome. But from a fan standpoint, it's going to be really exciting to see this quarterback competition play out over the next few months.
Well, and I think the fact that you have this legitimate quarterback competition for this offseason sort of adds another layer to something that we've been talking about, which is this is by far the most pivotal offseason. I guess besides the offseason when Lance Leipold was hired, this is the most pivotal offseason for him in terms of where KU is going to go, right? Like, you need to make sure you've got back-to-back seasons that have been pretty underwhelming, quite frankly, in a back-to-back 5-7 seasons. This has to be the offseason where you start to move things a little bit more positively on the trajectory of the program. And it's going to start with making the decision on the most important position on the field, which is the quarterback. So it'll be fun, as you said, to sort of track this over the course of the offseason into the spring. We'll have plenty more time to talk about it, obviously, as well. But I think that was a good little bit of a primer, I think, for the rest of the offseason and into spring. So I think that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Once again, would love to hear your thoughts on the bowl situation. Share your thoughts on KU, on the state of college football. Love to hear from you great KU fans. You can do that in the YouTube comments of our YouTube show. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can also subscribe on audio on Apple and Spotify. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. We're going to be talking more KU basketball later in the week as they prepare for their last real marquee matchup of the non-conference schedule against NC State. So we'll talk that coming up later on this week. But until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.